Well, let me just ask you this, though. Was all the psychological work helpful in any way?
Helpful what way?
Was it useful to understand your relationship with your mother at all those different levels, and then to ultimately see her as a high being? Or could you just have gone to seeing her as a high being and dispensed with the rest?
Well, the humanness of our relationship I saw from psychological points of view. The other planes, I didn't see them. It was, yes, it was. I don't. Was it useful, did you say?
Mm.
It wasn't useful in my spiritual work.
Mm. I guess what I'm asking is there a way in which, because so much of psychology is about going through all the muck and the mire and all of the terrible traumatic events you've had in your history with your parents and so on, and how those events have shaped us and constricted us. And I'm just always fascinated to look at where that fits in the spiritual work, or if it fits in the spiritual work. It's almost like sometimes the psychological stuff can act as a barrier to getting to the higher state.
How can it be besides a barrier? How can it be giving a lift to the spiritual?
Right.
How?
Well, I guess best illustrate that in my own life with the story of something that you shared with me years ago about my father. And that was, my father had been a very psychologically abusive, violent alcoholic. And he was dying of throat and lung cancer in the early 80s. And I was having a difficult time with him because I really wanted to heal the relationship, to somehow get it to a higher level before he died. And so I took time off to take care of him and be with him and live with him. And I was having a hard time because he wasn't being nice to me. He was being abusive, and not constantly, but more of the time than I could really convert into spiritual practice. So I went to visit you, and I was telling you this long story about my father. And at one moment you said, "I have an idea." And I said, "What?" You said, "Why don't you see your father as your guru?" And my heart sank, because I thought, my father, who was one of the most difficult people on earth, the thought of seeing him as my guru. And then you said, yeah, who else could he possibly be? So when I went back home and started to see him that way, it completely changed my relationship with him. Because, to me, the guru is always acting in the chela, the student's highest spiritual interest.
Yeah.
And to see my father's crankiness and abusiveness as a spiritual teaching, so that it shifted from seeing whenever he said something insulting to me, and when previously I would get all reactive and angry and, he shouldn't talk to me that way. How dare he? No father should speak to his son that way. It shifted to looking at him and going, boy, he's really good at this. And that was your gift in that situation.
But you, good at what you, good at, was it phony or was it difficult? I mean, what was she?
Well, I think, I should clarify it by saying that I'd already been working with spiritual teachings and practices for 15 years.
Yep. Yep.
So I could see it as my ego getting reactive or threatened or, and my getting defensive.
Yep.
And to see that in myself was really useful. And people ask me, well, was your father, when I tell this story, you think your father thought he was your guru? And the answer is no.
No.
No, he was just confused and angry and upset, but I could choose to see him that way.
That's a good story. Because my father was a kind of a practical, power-oriented, worldly man.
We had the same father.
Yeah. My
Although
father
yours wasn't an alcoholic.
Didn't drink.
Right.
And he was very, I never felt he was sensitive to me. I mean, I never felt, I was always his son, never was my person.
Mm-hmm.
And very that was going on for years and years and years. And when he was 90 years old, and I was taking care of him. And like you, I had many years of, I had been to Maharaj-ji, and when I was taking care of him, he was like a pussycat. He was like he was sweet. He was sweet. He was maybe he was a soul. I don't know, but he was just. I remember there was one time where I was holding his hand, and he was in bed, and I was in the chair next to him, and we were silent. And us being silent together had never happened. Never happened. And I got up and I went out to the next room, and I said to my brother, you can go in now. And he walked in, and then he came out again, now an hour. and he's mad as hell. And he says, he's not, you know, he ignores me. He ignores me. He wouldn't talk to me. He's just like he always used to be. Those two perceptions,
Yeah.
both of us had training that allowed us to make the shift to planes of the human relationship.
Mm-hmm. But if you see it all one-dimensionally, it's very thick. It's hard to get free.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I had psychedelics pounding at me,
Uh-huh.
and then Maharaj-ji, you know,
Mm-hmm.
loving me to even get through to this where I see you as a soul, and not you as my projections of my psychological stuff.